to go through some housekeeping before we get going, as we've got a few people still trickling in and we are expecting a few more, but let's just make sure that everybody's comfortable using Zoom. Can we firstly just ask everybody to keep yourselves on mute, but we do encourage you, please do introduce yourself using the chat function. So hopefully you'll have a command bar towards the bottom of your screen, and there should just be a little sort of speech bubble. If you click on that, you should be able to chat and introduce yourself. We've got James Worthington on the line this morning, but I'm sure many of you are also avid users of social media. By all means, use LinkedIn, use Twitter. Let's shout about the fact that we are talking about the resilience in the East Midlands this morning. This morning's session will be recorded, so we just want to make you aware of that, but that's really great because we'll be able to share it with anybody who's not able to join today. It could be colleagues of yours or people that for whatever reason haven't been able to make it. So please, again, keep yourselves on mute. Please do utilise the chat function. Please, access Twitter, use social media, and let's get an interesting event going. So Make UK is delighted to be hosting this morning, but it really wouldn't be happening without our four wonderful speakers, but our three excellent partners. So we're really pleased to be working in partnership this morning with the University of Nottingham, the University of Derby, and Nottingham Trent University. The presentations today are going to make reference to a programme of support that the three universities are working on together, which is called Productivity Through Innovation. I'm sure it won't be the last time you hear those three words. And there's funding to provide for SMEs in the D2, N2, leve region. So for those of you not familiar with that kind of geography, if you're in Derbyshire, if you're in Nottinghamshire, if you've got a headcount less than 250 people, you will be able to access some support for consultancy, placements, and the hiring of graduates for research projects on productivity and innovation. However, if you don't fit that remit, if you're not in that geography, or if you're a different size, perhaps you're a larger organisation, all three universities have different types of support and funding available for businesses to work with those partners. So what we will be doing throughout these presentations is really encouraging you to think about engaging with your local university and taking advantage of the great minds and the talent that sits within those organisations. So this morning we will firstly kick off. I'll give you an overview from Make UK and how we're nationally seeing manufacturing. We'll also think about actually what the situation in the East Midlands is looking like. And then we'll take a quick poll. We'll see how you're all feeling as the audience. We'll take a quick survey. We'll then move on, and we've got four excellent speakers that will give us some short snippets in terms of what they're seeing from the world, what they think is important right now, and some takeaways. And then we'll close at the end for a question and answer session, which will be done virtually. So please, as the speakers are presenting their findings, their thoughts this morning, please really do be active and ask questions through the chat function. So please put your questions on the chat function, and then I will try and get as many of those answered towards the end using our great panel. Okay, so hopefully I will just move us on through a couple of slides. So Make UK, we are the national organisation that represents UK manufacturers of all shapes and sizes. We've been in existence since the late 1800s. And part of our role is to gather the views, the sentiments, evidence from manufacturing to make sure that we understand how the sector is feeling. We do a particular economic barometer every quarter. We've been doing it since 1998. And here you can see the findings over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. It won't come as a surprise to you that the performance right now isn't particularly great. It's actually the worst set of results that we've ever seen since the survey began in 1998. And we've helpfully on the right-hand side, if you can see the bar for 2020 Q2, we've also just added on the results from what we saw in 2008 in the middle of the global financial crisis, just to give you a comparison. Now this is a balance of change, so this is indicating the direction and the mood. It's by no means the magnitude, so I just want to give you that health warning on the data there. Here you can see the UK regions and how confident they're feeling. Those that are dark blue are the most confident, moving then through to the lighter blue, and then the least confident, I'm afraid, are those showing in orange, which you can see today. Many of us are either based in the East Midlands or located very closely. The East and West Midlands showing not a particularly great mood and sentiment right now, and that really is driven by the strong automotive and aerospace supply chain that we have based across the region, which right now is of course pretty stressed, and hence we're seeing such results coming through. So the East Midlands, a real gem. I mustn't be biased, but I really do think that the East Midlands as a manufacturing region is just a stellar performer. The region employs the most proportion in manufacturing out of all of the UK regions, a stat that people don't really shout about or even that they're aware of. So we've got 291,000 manufacturing jobs in the East Midlands. That has decreased by 14,000 since 2019. But again, I must give you some sort of health warning and an undertone to that. The East Midlands has grown for many consecutive quarters, a number of years. We've seen some really strong positive results coming through. So if anything, that 14,000 decline is probably a little bit of a plateau. We of course have had lots of uncertainty in line with the sort of Brexit and now EU exit position. So please don't be disheartened by that decrease. You can see on the right hand side the proportion of the subsectors that sit within the East Midlands. So very dependent on food and drink, which is good because food and drink is a pretty resilient sector. You always make sure that you're feeding the family during tough times, and of course right now food and drink has been one of the sectors that has remained buoyant and quite busy during COVID-19. We've then also got quite a high degree of reliance on transport equipment. We do have one of the largest aerospace and rail clusters in Europe, perhaps even the world. So, you know, the region has still got a lot to shout about. The EU accounts for 49% of the exports. That's actually higher than the national average. However, productivity in the region is it's sort of the bottom of the pack. I hate to use the word worse, but it is 10th in the UK. But again, it's all relative. That really is driven by the high dependence on food and drink, rubber, plastics and non-metallic minerals, because those sectors typically are lower in their productivity because of the value that they are producing versus areas perhaps like Cambridge, where you've got a lot of pharma, med tech, chemical industry that typically generates a higher GVA. So we've been doing a sense check through our membership over the last few weeks, and here are some of the latest key findings that we've had. Throughout the start of the pandemic, roughly 9 out of 10 of our members remained operational. That's now at 98%. And if anything, manufacturers are telling us that nearly half believe that they have had a positive contribution to how they're perceived in their local community due to how they've operated through the pandemic. The ventilator challenge, turning their hand and diversifying to supply PPE, has perhaps awoken the nation to remembering that we do absolutely make things here in the UK. We are the 9th largest manufacturing nation in the world, and we produce nearly half of all of the UK exports and nearly 2/3 of R&D. So really good to see people actually noticing the sector, and hopefully we can champion the sector even more. So this chart here just takes you through our members' views around future redundancies. So over 40% tell us that they do plan to make redundancies over the next 6 months. And you can see here how that's broken down by sector. And probably quite a mixed bag for the East Midlands. You can see other transport, 78% are saying yes. And of course, I've already cited the region has quite a footprint of transport manufacturing, whereas food and drink is one of the most resilient and robust subsectors coming out in this data. So probably quite a mixed picture for the East Midlands. Here you can see just a breakdown in terms of operational levels. So what this tells me, that sort of fourth line up, the East Midlands bar, most or the majority are operating sort of 75 to 99% of their capacity. And then just to finish off, what does this mean? Thinking about resilience, the East Midlands here is indicating to us that it's perhaps ahead of the UK average in terms of forecast for the future. So you can see here the percentage of firms who are expecting to be between 75 and 100% by the start of 2021. So quite positive to see that 69% of you do think that you'll be at that top end of capacity by 2021, which is good. Okay, so we've got a quick straw poll for you. So hopefully my colleague Chris will just be able to present that to you. It's always a risk using technology like this. But if we could please just ask you, what is it that's keeping you up at night? It'd be really interesting for us because I'll just be able to share with you actually from our wider membership how your sentiments compare. So if we could just ask you to start voting. 2 out of 47 so far have done so. So please just give us a quick vote and we'll just keep the poll open for the next 20, 30 seconds or so. So just over half of you have voted, so we'll just keep it going. Don't worry, we won't be sharing your views, so be bold, share your concerns, what's keeping you up at night. This will really help our speakers as well be able to just deliver insight that really does hit the nail on the head in terms of your interests and being able to help you this morning. So we'll give it 20 more seconds. So this is actually probably as we forecast from what I can see so far. Okay, Chris, I think we're probably about ready to come to an end. Okay, so quite a clear winner there. 57% have voted that future order and demand levels really is the kind of standout concern there. Not closely followed by safe working environment, overhead costs and changes to import-export arrangements. I'll just contrast that for you versus what our wider membership told us. So similarly, actually, 91% were concerned about future order and demand levels, 41% very concerned about import-export arrangements, and then a kind of close third place, prompt payment and overhead costs really was the concern there. So I am just about to introduce our first speaker. So this morning, our first speaker is Mark Goldby. So Mark has got 30 years of manufacturing and leadership experience in the high-tech electronics industry. He's worked for corporate giants such as GEC, Plessey and Siemens, but he was also the co-founder of a fantastic business, SMS Electronics in Nottingham. Mark sold his interest in SMS in 2019, which has enabled him to continue to give back to the manufacturing sector. And Mark absolutely does do that. He's the chairman of the Nottinghamshire Manufacturing Network, which was established in 2013 to champion the strength and the diversity of Nottinghamshire-based manufacturers, and I'm sure he'll be making sure that you join his ranks if you haven't done already and you're based in the county. He sits on a number of regional and local advisory boards supporting the manufacturing sector, as well as several non-exec director roles. So Mark will be able to just pop his slides up, and he's going to be talking about from the edge to leading the edge. He'll be explaining how the current challenging environment for businesses could be an opportunity, and how do you adopt new practices and technology to make you fit for the future. And Mark will be outlining how working as part of a peer-to-peer network and strong links to academia, working with your local university, will accelerate your opportunities and how to get on the digital journey. So Mark, over to you.
Oh, thank you very much for the introduction, Charlotte, and good morning all. Thanks everyone for joining the event. I've got a 10-minute presentation I'd like to share with you, 10 slides approximately. and I've decided to split it into two halves. I want to share with you my reflections on lockdown and the pandemic and how particularly it's affecting our sector. But I'd also like to introduce you to the Nottinghamshire Manufacturing Network, which is a trusted peer-to-peer network that I'm involved in. And I'm going to reference quite a bit of activity that some of our members have been getting up to during the pandemic, because some of it's really quite novel. And I thought that would be quite useful to share with you. So I guess going first things first into my reflections, bizarrely enough, this is the phrase that first came to mind when I started to think back over the last 100 or so days. And many of us in manufacturing businesses have probably had this mantra pretty much in our mindset for a long time now: continuous improvement programs, etc., change management gurus, sponsorship from the senior leadership team, etc. But what's been extremely different this time with change is we're out of control with it. It's not it's largely out of our control, and it's been unprecedented in terms of the pace of change, the impact on our sector, the depth and ferocity of that change. And you know, having run a business for many years, and I'm sure you're the same with your businesses, sometimes you can feel very suffocating, and you feel that at times it's difficult to even feel like you can take time to draw breath, and you literally feel as well you're living on the edge. And I was kind of thinking about all that, but then I kind of compared back to the recession of the noughties, the end of the noughties, the banking recession. I thought actually we probably had a different opportunity this time to think about our businesses. And in the same way the NHS lockdown restrictions were really primarily put in place to give the NHS the opportunity to cope, I think the government support packages have done exactly the same for business. It's given us time to cope, and it's given us time to think about our businesses. And certainly initially, and Charlotte referenced this, certainly initially we had a lot of activity around repurposing for ventilator challenge and PPE production. But I think it's gone a lot further than that, if I'm absolutely honest with you, and certainly what I'm hearing from local businesses, it's gone deeper and it's gone more thoughtful. It's about revisioning our businesses. Interesting to see on the poll that concerns over future demand and future orders is a real concern. So how are we thinking to change and revision our businesses and our business models, our markets? And certainly from what I'm hearing from our members, the investment is still a very clear priority to underpin all of those above conversations that we're having around repurposing and reconfiguring our businesses. You know, a transformation can't take place without the investment, whether that's a monetary investment or an intellectual investment. But what I have seen to kind of reflect as well here, I've seen a fantastically impressive sector that's been extremely agile in how we've adapted. And I think that's added certainly to our resilience as a sector within the region. So our sort of speed of adaptation and adoption of new working practices and new regulations has been quite impressive. So is this the opportunity then? Is this an opportunity for your digitalisation programme to start? And where could your journey take you? You know, is this your opportunity to take your business from the edge to leading edge? And I'm pretty certain, I've seen the sort of people that signed up, sort of organisations that have signed up for this event, that many of you will have already started this journey. But if you haven't, it's not too late to start. And I'm just going to focus on 3 areas, and I've just got one more slide to share on this. I just want to talk about some of the experiences some of our members are wanting to share with you in this particular area. And if I just quickly look at those, from a process is clearly the most obvious place we always look as manufacturers, isn't it? It's the stuff that's happening outside our doors, it's the stuff that's happening out on our shop floor. And there's no denying that automation is going to become a more significant aspect of what we do and where we do it. But it isn't that point in particular that I want to dwell on, because there's a presentation on automation coming up, but it's about the integration, more integration. So I've certainly had a lot of discussions recently with businesses that are starting to spend this time opportunity to think about their businesses, to get underneath of some of their factory planning software, some of their MRP, ERP systems, and not necessarily look at the optimization, their functionality, but actually the expansion of some of their functionality to bring in other business processes that aren't necessarily integrated into it. For example, whether that's the ability to electronically upload customer orders or customer forecasts into their management systems, or at the back end of that process, the ability to auto bill or self-bill customers. So cutting out some of the administration and rigor that we find ourselves having to produce a lot of the time. So a question of kind of getting more out of what we have. And then likewise on markets and customers, once again, the poll was very, very strongly focused towards this is an area of concern. And isn't it kind of bizarre that at times like this, we should be thinking about how we could, generate new revenue streams or products or services. But that's what's kind of been happening by accident or design. That's what's been happening. I want to reference a local business in Nottinghamshire called Micromesh Filtration, who sell filters globally, and the owner manager there, Jimmy, had his son come into work, his teenage son, who said, Dad, can I have a look at using Google Ads to see if we can generate any interest or demand around the world for our products, that we can quick turn in within 24 hours. So they spent a bit of time on it. There was no expertise amongst anyone with that business to do it. And it's been extremely successful. It's been, in fact, so successful that it's become a repeatable revenue for them, which they can manage. And they're actually now thinking about putting some of their other products through on a kind of a full e-procurement stroke e-commerce type platform. So that's got them further into a digital journey through actually just one of those innocent questions that took place between a father and his son. Interesting stuff. And likewise, I want to reference another member company based over at Langer, Interflex, who traditionally are in the kind of automotive acoustic space and using technology to soundproof vehicles. Right at the outset of the pandemic, they started producing PPE equipment, like a lot of manufacturers did. But they found now they've got a repeatable and sustainable business, and they've actually set up a separate business unit, a separate legal entity to produce mass and PPE equipment going forward. So by accident or design, these businesses have found new ways of generating opportunities to find new customers and to find new revenues through new product streams. So really, really interesting in times. And then finally, my thoughts on employees is, there's no denying, the tech to enable events like this morning and the tech to enable your employees to work from home has been around for a long time. I've worked with video conferencing with my previous businesses for over 25, 30 years. So the tech's been there. We just never really had the strong impetus to get it done. And of course, this has pushed us this way. The pandemic has pushed us to this. And it's been extremely successful on the whole, I think, to enable certain back office functions to function and certain businesses to function during this time of lockdown. But it is kind of normally the preserve of the indirect workforce. So in our world of manufacturing, of course, we have our indirect population and our direct population, but probably with a notable exception that I'm aware of, which is another manufacturing network member called TQC, who actually produce bespoke factory automation equipment. And so it doesn't need me to tell you they're extremely busy right now, but they've quite uniquely been able to connect all of their dozen or so engineers who use all of their CAD programs and CAD machines, and they've got 9 different CAD systems physically in their factory, but they've enabled all of the engineers to remotely access those from home. So actually, this is quite a novel way that direct employees are now also able to work from home. But generally, in the main, manufacturers have not been able to do that with their direct workforce, and I think that's where my kind of striking a balance comment comes in, because I will kind of urge you.
Oh, thanks.
And that is company and cultural health, and also mental health. So the reason I say company and cultural health is that I spent a lot of time when I was managing SMS trying to bring my 2 large groups of employees together the indirects and the directs. For some reason, there seems to be a divide culturally, the traditional blue collar, white collar. I've always found it quite difficult. And if we're not careful and we don't communicate this in an effective way to make it clear as to the benefits of why the business is home working certain employee groups, then I'm afraid we could have problems with that divide becoming wider. So I'm sure that's something that may be already on your kind of radar as something to look out for. As of course, the very real possibility of mental health issues for staff who continue to work at home for long periods of time. And there's no denying it, of course, we're social animals, aren't we? And time away from colleagues, which actually can be a massive part of someone's social group as well as work group, can be extremely harmful on their personal mental health. And I'm going to kind of finish off this reflection section by quoting Charles Bonham, who's one of the directors at Bonham & Turner, which is an advanced precision manufacturing company in the north of the county. And Charles is very rarely in the office. Normally he's out with clients in the UK. He's overseas with clients as they do a lot of overseas work. And he says he's quite simply, he doesn't like it, but quite simply he's had to convert his miles into minutes. And what he means is his road miles and his air miles have had to be converted into minutes in the office, minutes on the phone, minutes on social media, minutes on Zoom, etc., etc. And that was probably kind of an interesting way of looking at how things have changed. Clearly, he wants to move back to it, as I'm sure we all do. But it is what it is for the time being. So, well, look, they were my kind of reflections on things. I'm now going to shamelessly plug the manufacturing network. So a little bit more about the network. As I mentioned earlier, we're a trusted peer-to-peer network. So all the people represented, the companies represented, are represented by senior managers or owner managers. We're a growing network, which is always pleasing to know. We're non-subscription. I will come back to that point in a minute because it's really important. So we're a group of SME businesses across the county of Nottinghamshire. We have one specific membership requirement, and that is we need to make something. It's really not that complex. And the reason we're non-subscription, it's been something of mine. I've always wanted to make sure that what we actually do here to trade amongst ourselves, if you like, is to share our wealth and knowledge with each other. That is the currency we trade in, and I don't think that needs to be something you should be paying for. I think you should be freely giving and freely receiving. And as a result of that, we've had this sort of growing group of organisations, and we've all of a sudden got a collective strength together. So if we were to kind of roll up all of our membership businesses into a single entity, which we're not, but if we were, it would be a sizable employer and a sizable business. As a result of that, and we're quite a varied bunch, we've started to have quite a bit of influence and collaboration around not only the county but further afield. And I say we're a mixed bunch, from brewing beer, who are our favourite, most favourite member, through to high-tech electronics. And we still make cricket bats in Nottinghamshire, but I have to say, very proudly have to say that as well. I'm not going to go through the charter, other than to say that one of the main reasons we set up this group a few years ago is we wanted to increase public awareness and about creating a positive perception of manufacturing. Nottingham has lost pretty much all of its OEMs over the years, but still is very heavily involved in manufacturing. So I felt we needed some way to do that. But it's turned into something a lot more than that now. And I want to draw your attention to the second point on there, which is about the benefits we share as a group. We really do support and guide and help each other, or each of the other members, about getting through our common issues, challenges. And this has been something we're extremely proud about. It's gathered a momentum all of its own. So I'm extremely proud to manage the group. And as a result, we've managed to start to influence and collaborate. So this is what I refer to as our sphere of collaboration and influence. So as you would expect locally, we are linked in and connected into both the city and the county council. Extremely proud and appreciative of the work they do to support us. Likewise with the University of Nottingham. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those shortly, but essentially they also co-facilitate this network and they also host us. So we're extremely grateful for their input. I sit on the board of Invest in Nottingham as a non-exec, so it's a simple and quite a novel connection into the local investment arm of Nottinghamshire. D2N2 need no introduction, of course, or either do the chamber. But more broadly, we also operate further around the region. Midlands Engine, I'm sure you're familiar with, is a collaboration throughout the East and West Midlands. We're very closely connected to the MTC at Coventry and some of the other high-value catapults that we have around the region. We are very proud to say we're an affiliate partner to Make UK, very proud of that fact. There are other membership organisations there, as you see, and I'll finish on the Department of International Trade. I do a little bit of work for them on inward investment, but we also have a lot of our members who are fairly expansive exporters. In fact, we have one guy who is an investment champion, so we're very much linked in to them as well. And so this is where we operate, this is where we collaborate, and this is where we influence. I would normally tell you when we meet, and of course we don't do meetings anymore. This is what we do when we meet now. Of course, it's a very familiar scene throughout the UK. We're doing these a lot. So if anyone complains about the breakfast quality being poor, they've only got themselves to blame. But this is where we would normally meet, and this is what I wanted to talk about briefly in terms of the connection to the university. This is their advanced manufacturing building on their Jubilee campus, which is a significant investment by both them and D2N2. It's SME focused, and it has a number of research themes. They're not the exclusive list, but all the sort of things that are important to our sector. And with the SME focus, it's extremely important to me and my membership within the network. There's a cheesy picture of the topping out ceremony with Professor Andy Long. And just to go to show you that architects can plan things and the builders can build them to the same spec. There we go, looking resplendent in all its glory, just like the artist's impression. So, and additionally, that's how that building sits amongst the other buildings on Jubilee campus, which incidentally, for those who don't know, was the old rally site in Nottingham. So sadly, no more bicycles made in Nottingham by rally. So just to wrap up, so this is me coming to an end now. We've made a great deal of progress as a group. I'm really happy where we've gone. We've defined our purpose and what matters to us. Strengthened that profile. That's been acknowledged nationally. I've been to Downing Street a couple of times to talk about this, and I'm always around the patch talking about this, to be fair. And we're attracting new members. Our members are happy in the way they're supporting each other. That's what it's about. We can make further progress, and I wasn't going to read that last line, but essentially, I'll be very, very interested if there's anyone who wants to join, clearly, but I'd also be very, very interested in anyone who would like to expand this concept throughout the region. I would love to have a discussion with anyone from Derbyshire, who could turn this into maybe a D2N2 manufacturing network, or why not look beyond at the Midlands Engine region as well. So I'd be really keen to hear from anyone who'd be interested in opening up my thoughts on that and things. So anyway, that's me done. I'm now going to stop sharing my slides and pass back to Charlotte. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mark. And we've next got a fantastic speaker, Rob Johnson. Rob has got a fascinating background, and I'm sure his insights will be really, really helpful to you right now, as bringing cash into your business and dealing with your customers, I'm sure, is a concern. Please, as we're going through, populate any questions that you've got in the chat box, and that will give our speakers some time just to mull over how they might be able to support you and respond. So please do ask any questions that perhaps Mark has got you thinking about. So Rob, from 2012 until mid-2019, was the Global Purchasing Director at Jaguar Land Rover. Prior to this, he's held senior procurement and quality management roles at both Rolls-Royce and Toyota. Rob brings the customer perspective to purchasing and supply chain priorities, and he's also got the practitioner's insight into strategic leadership, how to manage high-performing teams, how do you think in a lean way, quality operations, and managing a global supply chain. So Rob, over to you. We're going to hear how to manage supply chains through these turbulent times.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charlotte. And firstly, thank you to everybody on the line for spending your precious time listening to a few minutes of insights that hopefully I can share around the title Managing Supply Chains Through Turbulent Times. Now, having read that the other day, I thought to myself, well, actually, that could be accused of being a bit of a euphemism at the moment, because I think it's fair to say that, you know, we've had almost a conveyor belt of issues from a kind of social, from a kind of business and personal basis over the last few months, over the last 3 or 4 months. And an old boss of mine, I remember, said to me that people only get interested in the supply chain when it doesn't work. And I don't know whether that chimes with anybody in the businesses listening in, really, which is that suddenly I think we've found that, you know, the supply chain involves hundreds and thousands of different products and services coming together on a daily, weekly, monthly basis for us. And it involves hundreds of thousands of, you know, communication and media and email type traffic in order to make that happen. In other words, it's dependent on human interactions. And what we've seen over the last few months is how interruptible these supply chains are around the world. So I'm going to share some reflections in the next sort of 15 minutes or so about supply chain. I've spent all of my career in the supply chain, as Charlotte kindly introduced, most recently at Jaguar Land Rover, but I have a particular affinity to the East Midlands, which is where I've spent most of my career at both Rolls-Royce and at Toyota in the East Midlands, and I live in the East Midlands. I'm also very thankful to NTU for giving me the opportunity and inviting me to talk here today, along with Make UK. And I'm also supporting both Nottingham Trent University and also Nottingham University Business School with lectures and input on matters to do with the supply chain. So I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you. Let's move on and talk about the next topic then. Well, I can't move on. Let's just see. Yeah, sorry, there's some stickiness there. Sorry, yeah. So I'm going to start with a few questions, if I may, really. And don't worry if you can't answer these questions right away, but hopefully it's something that you might take away and have a think about. And really, these are just questions that I might ask you if I was to be a customer of your business. And maybe they're questions that you're already underway with, but maybe some of them are those that you perhaps need to think about how you're responding as a business. Firstly, tactical resilience. You know, many of you, I'm sure, are already operating sort of control tower, you know, daily stand-up meetings, war room type approach around the, you know, the pipeline, the supply pipeline, the lead time visibility that you've got from your supply chain, your sub-tier mapping. You know, have you cleaned up your data? Do you understand who your high impact and high risk suppliers are? And importantly, do you understand, you know, which parts could stop you building your products and services and which parts you might be able to retrofit and perhaps, you know, you have a different type of emphasis on. So all of those issues I think are really important to take care of. And we've heard already about, you know, future demand is what's really interesting and keeping people awake at night. So do you have volume scenario plans for these uncertain times? You know, some, depending on your sector, you know, some companies might well still be in a survival mode. You know, over the next 3 or 6 months, you might actually, you know, be very uncertain about what the demand is for your products out there. Other sectors, other companies might say, well, no, actually we're stabilized. We think over the next 3 or 12 months, we're going to climb back, as we heard in the survey. Others might say, well, actually, no, we're going gangbusters. We're in a segment that's actually succeeding. So, you know, do you understand your different scenario plans and have you started to share those with suppliers? So have you got an up-to-date supply chain strategy which can get you match fit is the question, and is it an executable plan? You know, are you monitoring your key suppliers? Are you talking regularly to them about your performance and about your plans? And have you mapped and segmented your different suppliers in your supply chain? And are you engaging them to make sure you're getting maximum support and performance? And whilst I've talked here about, you know, our relationship with your suppliers, if you like, you may also recognize your customers, you know, may well be doing some of this to you because you're part of their supply chain. So this could also give you an insight as to what some of your customers might be thinking about. And of course, taking advantage of all the government support, which has been considerable, is important, but also, you know, what support and benefit can you have of working more closely with suppliers is something you need to think about. And I remember years ago when I was at Toyota, I used to complain bitterly sometimes about my suppliers to my boss, who was a guy called Shuhei Toyoda, part of the Toyota family. And he turned quick as a flash and he pointed to me, he said, Rob, you get the suppliers you deserve. And what he meant was it was my responsibility. And if your suppliers are not doing what you want, You have to look in the mirror, and that was something I never forget from my days at Toyota. So this whole issue about grasping your supply chain and understanding the impact of your suppliers on your customers is really, really important. Who are the key suppliers in your supply chain enabling you to deliver the value to your customers? You know, what are the most important things to your customers, and do you pass that down to your suppliers? Do they understand how they're doing relative to what your customer metrics are? You know, do you have line of sight down to the suppliers in your sub-tiers and so forth? So you sit in, as this little diagram shows on the right, you sit in a value chain. And so do you really understand how you fit into the value chain, customers above you, suppliers and sub-suppliers beneath you? Have you got a good grasp of that and a good map of that? And then the other term I like to use is what is your cost anatomy when you think about supply chain? And it's true to say raw materials and bought out finished components are usually the greatest cost in a manufacturer's cost of goods sales, as this diagram shows. And so, you know, what percentage of your cost of goods are from externally supplied suppliers is a question it's worth asking. Is it 60%? Is it 50%? Is it 40%? And just out of interest, you know, Jaguar Land Rover, for example, 60% of its costs, if you consider all the costs of its labour to assemble the vehicles, all the cost of its engineering and development, 60% of those costs are made up of suppliers. So that means suppliers are critically important to the way, you know, they manage their business. And so it's worth you trying to benchmark, you know, how important are suppliers to your business? It might give you some clue of how you need to focus on them. So managing global supply chains, I guess I've got a list here of 6 things that I'd like to perhaps just share that I think, you know, really matter for you if you're going to put together a new strategy for the uncertain times ahead. And these 6 items, the only reason there are 6, by the way, is I read somewhere that you can't remember more than 7. So no particular reason why there are 6, but I think they are as follows. You know, how important are suppliers to you in terms of the technology that they bring to you and your product, and the development support that they provide for you bringing your products to market. Secondly, flawless operations. Absolutely. You know, this pressure point on quality, cost and delivery is going to continue in this new world as much as, if not more than currently. You know, strategic sourcing. How do you go about choosing your suppliers and selecting your suppliers needs to be thought through carefully. And how do you get this blend of having suppliers compete for your business on the one hand, and on the other hand, you know, you want them to collaborate and support you once you've selected them. So this whole notion of managing and balancing between competition and collaboration in the supply chain. And relationships really do matter in supply chains, as we know. And trust means, you know, you say what you're going to do and you do what you're going to say in your behaviours with your suppliers. And last but not least, and probably increasingly important, I think, is sustainability. The whole issue around green and CO2, and of course risk management. You can see the cartoons on the right. These are the type of tools, just to give you some image, that companies like Jaguar Land Rover and Rolls-Royce and Toyota are using to manage their commodities, to assess the competitiveness of suppliers, and to manage the risk of their supply networks. And I think in summary, it means that, you know, the challenges that everybody's facing at the moment, which we've talked about in some of the previous discussions as well, is about rethinking the way you're working with your suppliers. You know, how do you speed up the product technology? How do you improve the processes? How do you innovate in terms of services, especially with this whole notion of, you know, reducing our carbon footprint? I think there are some really important competitive advantages if we can break through in that area. Improving the execution of your quality, cost and delivery, clearly very, very important. So it's all about, in my mind, you know, cultivating a much more competitive and productive partnership with your supply network. You know, integrating the systems and the processes across business boundaries. We'll hear a little bit about that in one of the next speakers. And having a seamless value chain, so connecting the supply chain, so you are, you know, really, optimizing the service delivery offer to your customers. And I think all of these things, all of these pressures on businesses, whatever segment we're in, are going to need stronger supplier support than ever before. So some practical suggestions I could give you to, you know, what should I do today? Well, I would say, you know, you should be critically reviewing your supply base. You know, have you sized all your key suppliers? Do you know who they are? By spend, for example. And I would also recommend a box gridding approach. Well, you know, so if you map them by choice and leverage on one axis, as you can see on this cartoon, and by complexity on the other axis. And complexity and impact means, how long would it take me to change this supplier? And if you only do that with even just 20% of your suppliers, they're probably 80% of your value. You can map the suppliers, as this cartoon shows, to understand how do I need to respond to these different suppliers in the different segments. Some supplier segments where I've got a lot of choice, I may be able to be a dominant buyer. I can pick and choose and I can play the market. Down at the bottom right though, look, we've got some major suppliers there, very important to us, evaluated at high risk, where actually moving from that supply is going to be extremely difficult. So this whole notion of thinking about the criticality and the risk of suppliers, I think, is something that you should be doing if you've not already done. And how much of your demand plan are you sharing down your supply chain? And we heard that's a really important topic for everybody. Have you got different scenarios, let's say a base scenario, an upside, downside, where you're sharing that with suppliers so they can flexibly respond? I mean, I think the key thing I would say is, don't go silent at this time. And with all of your suppliers, keep them informed of your business plan would be what I'd say, particularly if the suppliers are bigger than you and you are just one portion of their business. It's important for you to engage with them. And I'd certainly encourage you to negotiate. Yep, as a purchasing guy, of course. All these things that are really key to your business performance and profitability: pricing, payment terms, stock holding. Can they give you preference on capacity? Because I think many supply chains are now tight. Lead time, technical support, all these areas where I think you can negotiate with suppliers, but recognize where supplier sits in this segment that we've talked about, and also recognize, what you've agreed in your contracts and what are the renewal dates of those contracts. So I guess I'm really sort of encouraging you to think about mutual support with suppliers. What radical ideas can you come up with? We heard Mark talk a little bit about this, where you might look to work more closely with suppliers to create a kind of two-way protection if you can. Are there ways in which you can work share with particular strategic partners? Can you diversify together into new markets, for example? Or could you even reciprocally trade with your suppliers? That kind of area of discussion is worth having, I think. And overall, I'd encourage you to have a communication plan. Be open, be trusting. Relationships do matter. So I'd encourage you to get on the front foot with your suppliers, but also be ready for surprises, because not all suppliers will necessarily cooperate in the way that you want. And then finally, I mentioned NTU, where I'm involved in doing some support work there, and they very kindly invited me along today. And I wanted to just leave you with this slide, really, which is where NTU, in the supply chain management academic team, are looking to develop our offer to businesses in this region around the whole notion of supply chain strategy. And we've got 3 support offers in mind at the moment, which I'll leave you with. One is perhaps a one-day strategic procurement workshop where we could look at, a series of lectures and discussions exercises around the principles and the approach to supply chain. We envisage this would be, key responsible supply chain people from your business, typically 6 or 8 people on a one-day event like this, maybe from different companies, so we can share best practice. There'd be some pre-assessment where we exchange different best practice in the different companies and look at, many different tools and techniques around things like supplier selection, around the way we segment suppliers, which we talked about, and how we get prepared with our negotiation behaviors. And then we're also looking to develop a couple of type of engagements, a short period engagement, let's say, which would probably last about 5 days of co-working between NTU and between the companies that were interested. And we'd look at all these different elements you can see listed around, spend diagnostics, maybe some deeper self-assessment, look at tools like supplier scorecards, look at the segmentation box grid that we've just talked about, and also the supplier risk assessment and how are you looking at the impact and likelihood of things happening in your supply chain. And then a deeper engagement, again, on a one-to-one company basis, covered by an NDA, maybe lasting about 15 days, we're thinking, where we'd go into more detail and perhaps support you in developing your own commodity strategies, your own supply negotiation and engagement plans, and look at your supplier selection methods and your overall supply chain organization and give you some review and feedback of that. So that's what we're trying to practically offer in terms of advice to companies who might be interested. And if you are, let's discuss. Please contact us. We'd be very interested to talk to you to see how we can be of most useful support to your company. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, for your expert insight. And I'm sure there's a few pieces of homework that you've left people that have dialed in this morning to go and do. It looks like there's a few benchmarks that really would prove quite useful exercises right now. And I guess it's something Make UK has absolutely seen the need for businesses to try and find new suppliers, diversify the businesses that they are working with where they've perhaps been caught short due to disruption throughout COVID-19. So now we're about to move on to our third speaker, and we'll be focusing on digital manufacturing and the role that technology has to play in the world post-COVID-19. Interestingly, 81% of the manufacturers that we have spoken to do believe that technology makes a more resilient manufacturing business, and 96% believe that COVID-19 has now given them the reason, the need to invest in technology. So hopefully it's quite good that COVID-19 might just be that stimulus, it might just be that hook to get business owners, boards investing in technology that perhaps they've been a little bit dubious of over the last few years. So if I can hand over to our third speaker, we've got Dr. Leonage, who is a senior lecturer in engineering management at the University of Derby. He's got over 18 years of teaching, research and knowledge transfer experience. And his particular area of expertise, his thought leadership really is around sustainable operations, supply chain management, systems modelling and simulation, circular economy and Industry 4. So can we hand over to you? You just need to come off mute.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah, good morning, everyone. So thanks for your introduction, Charlotte. So again, many thanks for attending this webinar. So we welcome everyone. So I'm a little bit going to talk about today about how digital manufacturing and a role of Industry 4.0 in post-COVID-19 situation, especially with manufacturing. So I hope you will find some useful stuff during my presentation. Yes. Right, it's working. So this is my overview of the presentation. Before I go to the straight away to the Industry 4.0, so I'm going to talk about a little bit of impact of the COVID-19 on manufacturing system. Hopefully you also feel some of this situation. And then we had to think about what lessons we learned during this pandemic. And also then after that, I'm going to talk about the fourth industrial revolution, Industry 4.0, and their key techniques and how can we help all these techniques for our post-COVID manufacturing system. And also I'm going to talk about a little bit about the challenges, because it's a very challenging technology. And also there are a lot of challenges for the implementation as well. So it's a very short presentation, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. All right. So first, we had to look at like the impact of the COVID-19 of manufacturing. So I hope you also face some of these challenges and impact. So definitely we know that the COVID-19 has had a significant impact on the manufacturing industry. Traditional supply chains and the manufacturing ecosystems are failing, and we need to shift to a more adjustable and agile solution that is fully enable. So that is something we have to very, very important. We learn something from, we need a more adjustable and agile solutions, right? And also the UK and manufacturing sector has severely hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you go to and research some of the UK, Make UK reports, it says that the CIPS, like a Chartered Institute of Purchase and Supply Institution, managers index failed into record a low of 32.6 in April. So normally it's going between 60 and 50. So it's like almost a half drop into this record level. And also most manufacturing industry sectors suffering from this pandemic. As example, car manufacturers shut down their production lines for weeks, and the aerospace and mechanical equipment manufacturers severely hit. I hope some of the you also, I think, face similar problems. And also the recovery is expected to take some time, and it is expected to take until 2022. It's a long time. Another 2 years we need to, we need a very good recovery plan to regain our manufacturing system again. However, there are some industries like food and beverage production, pharmaceutical and chemical industries are performing best out of other industries. So, they got a huge demand of certain products. So, sometimes they couldn't cope up with this kind of demand. So, as a result of this COVID-19 mandated lockdown, so you can see the supply chains are disrupted, stopping the flow of materials throughout the supply chain, intermediate parts and finished goods, and some of the assembly line are forced to halt and curtail certain operations because of lack of parts and workforce, and even employees' health is serious concern. Because of the physical interaction, we have to follow some government rules of social distance, and also almost zero demand for certain product, and while increasing the demand for others, especially because there's zero product demand. So how can you switch to the something else during the crisis? If you want to make PPV items, so how can we do all these things, right? So next one. Lesson learned during this. So this is very important, because before we go for any recovery plan, so we need to consider the following actions, whatever we lesson learn. So first thing is, I think, quick response is very, very important, right? So how we can respond quickly, rapid to the change level of the demand, because certain product demand goes so quickly. So how can we change things, right? How can we make our supply, how can we negotiate with our suppliers to change our demand and adapt to the product and services to each market changing needs? Because sometimes we have to change our product to the different thing. Maybe if you want to make a PPE as example, so you have to switch to some of the new products maybe. So therefore, I think quick response is something we have to think about. And real-time visibility, again, very, very important. I think the previous speaker, Mike, also talked about like integration, or sharing information. All these things are, I think, very, very important. Again, real-time visibility into availability of raw materials across your supply chain, finished good, where the work in progress things are. And again, new addition is like health and hygiene factors across the supply chain. So something new we have to think about during this period. So maybe next 2 years, I don't know, maybe we have to think about again health and hygiene factors, social distance working. So this is something very, very challenging. And definitely COVID-19 is a wake-up call for all the supply chain management, rethinking our supply chain. And another one is, so global valuation. So, we all know the just-in-time, we are practicing just-in-time production, just-in-time supply chain. Is this the case now, or either we have to think about the just-in-case now? Because just-in-time is okay, but I think I would say there's a new addition now, just-in-case, how we're going to change the situation the way we want. So hopefully in the future, we have to think about the just-in-time plus just-in-case. So I think the answer to some of these questions is the digital transformation is one of the most important thing, as I think Mark also mentioned about like more automation, more integration across the whole supply chain and smart factories and all these things. I think this is something I would like to mention. Right. So, so I think fourth industrial revolution, I think you hope everybody knows that what is Industry 4.0. So this is, I think, very, very challenging and very, very future manufacturing, especially people want to go for the Industry 4.0. This is the fastest and easiest way to transform concept into reality. So basically the Industry 4.0 is a fundamental change in the way we live, the way we work, we manufacture things, even our economy. It is disrupting every industry in every countries. So basically fourth industrial revolution or Industry 4 brings the combination of a digital world and virtual world and the physical world together. It's mainly used like emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, 3D printing or additive manufacturing, more simulation, robotics, Internet of Things, and big data and cloud computing. So this is a very, very important techniques. Everybody, I hope you also can use some of these techniques into your business So Industry 4.0 aims to create a smart physical system that can dynamically react to the real world changes and optimize production flow. So I think so. So if you go to the next one, so how can Industry 4.0 can help in the post COVID-19? So as we learned a lot of lessons during the last few previous slides. So one of the major thing is Industry 4 can help is the visibility, right? Gaining the visibility and transparency is the first step of the digital transformation roadmap. Then then only we can prepare our manufacturing and supply chain for the quick response using some of these key technique used in the Industry 4.0. As I think Rob mentioned, so one of the thing is like supply chain collaboration. So how can we like increase responsiveness throughout our supply chain? As example, transparency, holistic view of the supply chain, visibility of across the all tiers in the supply chain, and communications, right? The real-time information pretty much available all the time for all supply chain managers. So based on the maybe all the forecasting information, or be the what kind of product you need, all these things we can communicate real-time information. And collaboration, see opportunities for collaboration more rapidly. As mentioned, Rob, by me, we can mention like if you go for the new joint innovation, as example, if you want to make a PP or ventilator, so how we going to communicate with your suppliers to switch into your product, into the new product like a PPE or ventilators or something like that, right? So therefore, I think collaboration and all these things and flexible to change. The supply chain has a relevant information to respond to any changes, as example. So how are you going to change your production to the different or flexible to change based on the any dynamic situation, any market change, right? So this is very, very important. I think so using this Industry 4.0 technique like horizontal vertical integration, Internet of Things, big data analysis, cloud computing, all this connectivity help to increase visibility across the supply chain, and which give more transparency, communication, collaboration, and flexibility to change and all these things. So this is something we have to think about how Industry 4 can be helped with supply chain collaboration as well. So another technique I would say like a 3D printing as example. So you all know that the 3D printing is clearly headed for the bright future. A lot of industries now use as example, big manufacturer like even car manufacturer like Volkswagen is using additive manufacturing technology to design and products of high volume manufacturing of metal parts as example. So another very good example I can give like during the COVID pandemic, 3D printing technology is used to manufacture critical PPE for health sector that was stuck in the supply chain, because some people want to switch into their manufacturing as a car manufacturer, they want to switch into the manufacture PPE or ventilators. So then hopefully they want to design new digital using software that they want to design the some of the PPE item, collaborate with their suppliers, and then they can test all these things in virtual reality environment, maybe using the additive manufacturing, they can make some prototype and they can test, and then they can put into the production. So therefore 3D printing is a very important things. And artificial intelligence, machine learning again constantly reassess and replan activities. Maybe if you want to change your production plan based on your rapid response or according to the real-time visibility of your forecasting. So basically then you can change your production plan. And again, robotics, basically automation is one of the most important thing, because again it's supporting for the distance social distancing as well, right? If you want like less people work in your factory, hopefully you can use the robotics. And so some of this operation you can control from working from home as well, as example in a certain situation. So I think the Industry 4.0 give a very good solution, some of the problem you face during the COVID situations, right? In addition to that, definitely it will one of the contribute sustainability, because there are a lot of these all techniques are very sustainable oriented. As example, additive manufacturing, they use the less materials, all the smart machine are less energy consumption, so definitely it contributes to the sustainable development as well, and also contribute the health and safety of the employee as well. So this is the one of the good example I can give. I mean, I already explained last slide, some of the automotive example during the COVID. A lot of automotive company have made the valiant effort to change their production lines from cars to ventilator. So how they did was, I mean, first, I mean, they take a digital design of the part required to make a ventilator, and then they communicate or collaborate with the suppliers, and then so after that they use, like example, 3D printing to make a prototype, and they test it in a virtual environment, and then they manufacture, scale up the production for the based on the demand, and then they send it to the originally manufacturer to assemble and then validate it. And so what we need is mainly digitally integrated supply chain and manufacturing system to cope up with this kind of situation, because this is something I would say. I mean, this is not only the, I mean, recovery plan, I mean, in the future. So we are heading to more digital world. So I think, therefore, I think Industry 4.0 is one of the most best solution for your manufacturing systems, right? So this is the very good architecture. So you can see so how smart factories are linked into the other side of the, like one side you can see it's linked to all the suppliers, and also other side you can see the link to the customers through the different technique, Internet of Things, and cloud computing. So so inside the factory you can see automation, virtual reality stuff, and additive manufacturing, and all these things, right? So basically, the smart factory is fully integrated and collaborative manufacturing system that responds in real time to meet the change in demand and the condition of the factory, conditions in the factory, and even for the supply chain, and even for customer needs. Smart factory allow machine to work more effectively or efficiently through automation and optimization, and it also support, I mean, as we know, the lean and agile manufacturing. Even I think the previous speaker Mark also mentioned that information sharing is one of the most important thing, like a ERP system. You can use all these information sharing system throughout the industry technique, using Internet of Things, big data, and all this cloud computing. And also he mentioned about the more integration we need, more automation. So all these are Industry 4.0 is the technique I think can supply all this requirement. And by adopting Industry 4.0 into your business, definitely you can increase your overall resource efficiency, response to the dynamic change. Like a quick response is one of the most important thing during the COVID pandemic. Which will give a more dynamic change and quick response, and improve the product quality, and also reduce the cost, increase the safety among your employees, and also support for the greater sustainability. I hope that I think some of these techniques definitely value for the organization. I don't, so therefore I think about some of these techniques, how you can adapt into the your manufacturing systems. So my last slide. So I mean, there are definitely challenges for implementing 4.0 digital transformation, because I mean, we talk about all this benefit, but when you go in reality, I mean, there are definitely a lot of challenges. So one of these lack of sense of urgency, right? Because I mean, still, I mean, some industries say it is not our business priority, so they do normally what they normally do day to day, like production planning and all these things. But I think we have to think about now. So how we going forward our manufacturing system, especially for Industry 4.0 technology, how can we adapt all this technology into our business, our manufacturing system? And the other one is a lack of strategic vision of the technology within company, insufficient support from leadership, lack of coordination with other organizations, because sometimes I mean you can create a smart factory within your own, but if your suppliers and customers are not comply with your requirements, I still your supply chain not much smart, right? So skill shortage, right? So there is a lot of problem with the skill shortage of the lack of awareness of this technology, And I mean, cost is always problem. So that's why government or some research institution like the Make UK, and we need to think about how we can support industry in terms of funding, so to install or implement this kind of technology, and the right finding right partners. So these are some of the challenges, not all, so we have to overcome in the future, especially East Midlands SME companies and all these things. So thank you very much. So that is my presentation. So we can discuss in our panel discussion if you need anything. Right. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Our next speaker and our final speaker then this morning is Karen Hodgson, General Manager at Canal Engineering Training Academy. Karen's got over 30 years in training and development, working in further education colleges, commercial businesses, and also private training providers at a really senior level. Karen actually moved to Canal Engineering in 2016 to help them expand and develop their own training offer. And a fantastic piece of insight: when Karen's not busy working at Canal Engineering, she's dedicated to Formula One. She's a boating enthusiast, and my favourite snippet, Karen, from your private life: you hold a private pilot's licence. So, Karen, over to you, and why it's really important right now that we continue to invest in the next generation.
Okay, thanks everybody. I hope you can see my screen. Is that okay, Charlotte?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, well, thank you for the glowing introduction. My private life sounds much more glamorous than it actually is, but there we go. I'm just going to explain our experience of accessing the future skills of a graduate through the project. If I can move my slide on. There we go. Productivity through innovation. I was introduced to this through the Nottingham Manufacturing Network, which I know everybody's plugged this morning, but I can't speak highly enough of the organisation. It's really helped our business in lots of ways. And I am on the steering group, so I would wholly recommend that if you're not a member, then do join up. That said, I came across the project through one of the meetings, and I went away and I thought, yeah, we could definitely use the services of a graduate. I specifically run the training division of the business. So one of the things that we struggle with is marketing our services, because we, like a lot of businesses, you beaver away doing a really good job, but you're not really that good at telling everybody. And we need to expand. So I will explain what our project is, but I did discuss it with our MD, and he was very supportive as usual, and particularly more supportive when I explained that it wasn't going to cost him anything. So I had the initial meeting with Paul and Megan from Nottingham University, talked over my idea for a graduate placement, and everyone agreed that the project would work, so we signed up. And it's a really fantastic opportunity to work with a graduate on a dedicated piece of work. So we didn't have the knowledge or the capacity to take that work on within our training section. We do have a marketing function within the business, but SEAT is just a small division, so we only get a small percentage of their time, and it wasn't enough to move us on. And we were really comfortable that working with a graduate would give us access to a higher level skill and a professional approach, which is actually what we've got. We also really dedicated to skill development, both for our own company and the wider community. So we hope to give back to that graduate and help them make the transition from study into the world of work. And it's also really good for our team, because we're only a small team and we're quite insular in a way. So actually working with someone new to the organisation, fresh ideas, new blood, and get rid of some of our preconceptions. The other benefit really is that the graduate is much younger than most of us, and our target market is much younger than most of us. So some of the things that we don't think are trendy and attractive, potential apprentices do. So our particular business need was marketing of our different strands of training. Our main source of income really is split across apprenticeship delivery and programs for the unemployed. So very different markets. And as I said before, apprenticeships generally are targeted at younger people, although there is no age limit to being an apprentice. We need to maximise the use of social media platforms. We're not very good at it. We don't have the time or the resource to do it. So that was a particular area that we really wanted to develop. So the graduate that we're working with is developing templates and frameworks that we can then continue to use once the placement is over. So we're looking at something that's sustainable. Because the placement is funded through a project, there is some paperwork. We do work with public sector funding all the time, so it didn't come as a surprise to us, but it wasn't really painful. The project support team were really good, and the sign-up process was quite quick, to be honest. So once we got over the initial completion of the project brief, then it was plain sailing. Whilst I'm recommending the project, I would say to you it's really important to be clear about your project brief at the start, because that's what the project team used to recruit. So you've got to be clear so everybody understands what it is that you're looking for. We did get quite a lot of applications. I have to say that they were all very well presented. Everybody came across as very keen. However, not all of them had the experience and skills we needed. And you do have to stay focused on the placement, because you're putting time and investment into a person, but you want them to give something back to your business, so that it had to be the right fit for us. We created a short list, and they didn't all turn up, to be honest, but we were really focused on getting the right person. So the one that did turn up for the first round of interviews wasn't the person for us. Really good candidate, but just wasn't experienced enough in the areas that we needed. So we went back to the team. They re-advertised our placement, and we ended up selecting our current graduate. And she has drive and skills that we were looking for. But of course, this was back in March, so things have changed quite rapidly for everybody. So it all came to a halt. As a training provider, we had to close. We couldn't have face-to-face contact, and we all worked from home. So our graduate placement was delayed because while she's in Nottingham, she actually lives in London, so she went home. So we had a delay, which was understandable, and we finally exchanged contracts. I sound like I'm selling a house. We signed contracts to take on our graduate. That was all completed during May. So she started working with us, and because of the delay, the project was supposed to go on until probably next month, but actually she's now working with us until December, which is her flexibility, and the project team's flexibility has been really helpful because we've been in a bit of a sort of shutdown, standstill at the moment. The benefits of the scheme, it was very straightforward. They've been very flexible with us, very supportive. We did get a good range of applicants for our vacancy. The graduate is really focused and has become part of the team. So it's a shame that we're still all working remotely, but it's working fine at the moment, and hopefully by Christmas we will have gone back to being able to do some face-to-face work with our graduate. And I suppose, yes, it's some of our time, but we're getting a huge benefit from it. And it's fully funded, so we're not actually having to pay for the graduate's time, which is a real bonus. Our future plans are to keep the project evolving. I mean, it has changed from our project brief. Our graduate is working across different sectors of the business. She's working closely with our marketing manager. So we have had to change and adapt, and some of our ideas we've had to put on hold because we're more focused on remote working at the moment. So everybody has embraced having the graduate working with us, and we really value her experience and particularly her insight into our target market, because she's come up with ideas that we wouldn't have thought of. So really, really good. Would we recommend this? Yes, we definitely would. I would say define your project quite clearly, be clear on the skills and the person you want, and you need to be tough, because we interviewed people who really, really wanted experience in a business, but they weren't right for us. You do need to be adaptable. We've had to change quite significantly because of the COVID situation, but we're learning as much from her as she's learning from us, I think, and it's so good to have this fresh view come in. So support your graduate to progress. I think we would really like to see our graduate go on and do really well in the future. So it's a real positive from both sides. So yes, I would definitely recommend it. I'm happy to take questions. My background is skills, so if you want to ask me anything about skills generally, I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. And I just wanted to actually ask for your comment that you provided at the Nottinghamshire Manufacturing Network forum yesterday morning that was very powerful, that we mustn't stop investing in the future, and some of these stats around apprenticeship vacancies, and of course the sort of pipeline delay that if you stop investing today, in 4 years time you're going to feel the pain for that. Could I just ask you for sort of your background, your views on investing in the future during a pandemic?
Yes, certainly. I mean, this current situation's dropped on us all, we've been fortunate. Our apprentices, our own employees and the other apprentices are so far all working, and although we had to close down and stop our day release, we've done remote working, but a lot of businesses are not opening up new vacancies to apprentices. So nationally, I think it was based on last month, the number of apprenticeship vacancies across the country was 85% down on this time last year, which is absolutely massive, and that's every sector. For engineering, our typical apprentice starts at a lower level, and they progress through to level 3 with us, and they're on programme for between 3 and 4 years. So if you stop that now, you're going to have a massive lag of getting those skills into your business, because yes, they'll become productive quite quickly, but at a lower level. So you're not going to have the skills in your business in 5 years' time. It's a real medium-term decision. I'm working with our employers, and I sent something out yesterday to advise them what support there was for apprentices, and particularly if they were made redundant. And one business actually came back and said they were making redundancies, but they'd taken the view that it was important to keep the apprentices, to keep the skills going. And that's exactly the right way of thinking about it. You've got to have that balance, because we started in 2013 with our apprentices. It took our average age of shop floor worker from in the late 50s to the early 30s now. So that's massive. So that's a 20-year drop, and that's taken probably 5 or 6 years. So if we have a gap in that, we're going to end up in 5 or 6 years' time with a skills shortage. So it is important to keep a balance. There are some support mechanisms for apprentices who become redundant. The government have really promoted apprentices staying engaged with their studies through furlough, and we've managed to do that. So it's hard for us all, but I feel particularly sorry, if that's the right word, for young apprentices who have really struggled being furloughed. They can't go out, they've lost the social contact. Some of them have really struggled to stay engaged. So whilst we're there to promote knowledge and skills in engineering, we've actually been doing lots of pastoral work to keep them motivated and get them to come back into work, which most of them are doing now.
Fantastic work, Karen, thank you. We'll be staying around for the next few minutes, so if you do want to pose any questions to the speakers, populate them in the chat. But before you do all dash off, I'll just make sure that you've got the really vital information that you need to start working with the partners and some of the speakers that you've heard from today. So a massive thank you, all of you that have joined and given up an hour and a half of your time, but our 4 fantastic speakers that have given you their insights and experience of both their career, but particularly the last couple of months and their plans for the future. So can I just encourage you, please, there's been a few bits and bobs that I've taken away. Engage with your local university, make sure that you are taking all of the advantage that is there. They've got some fantastic programs on, and sometimes they can appear as a big organism, a large organisation that you might feel that you can't penetrate or they're not right for you, and that's absolutely not the case. They're a great team, they really do want to help your business, and they are absolutely pragmatically focused. So please think about working with your local university. The details you can see just there. We are just about to post a survey in the chat box, so please give us your feedback, tell us how we can help you. If you're based in Nottinghamshire and you're making something, I think Mark's been very clear, join the club, and it would be remiss of me not to say, if you're not already engaging with Make UK, then have a chat with us. There are different forums around the country, lots of different local networks, and we have an oversight as to those. So if you're not based in Nottinghamshire, have a chat with us and we'll be able to make sure that you're signposted to a local cluster if one exists, and if not, let's have a chat about forming one. So that's everything from us. Thank you all for joining us. As I say, we're around for the next couple of minutes, so if you do want to pop anything in the Q&A, we'll make sure that our speakers can answer those questions for you. Mark, I wondered if I could ask you a quick question. Given your sort of finance background and the idea of moving from just in time to just in case, won't that scare the sort of finance professionals, this building up of inventory, or is that kind of capital getting tied up worth it because of the security that it offers?
Who was that to, Charlotte? Was that me?
To you, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I know buffer stocks, contingency inventory. I mean, these are phrases and words, aren't they, to keep FDs having sleepless nights. So I guess for me, it's about the opportunity that you would miss by not having it. And I think the resilience you need to be thinking about in your supply chains has got to be about those opportunities and whether you can take advantage of them. But also, the lockdown has taken our thoughts of our supply chains to a new level, because we probably, when everything's fine and everything's working well, guess what? We don't really we don't really review it because it works. And what this has really done is shown us that we've got some problems. So you need to address it. And it can be done in a number of different ways. But I don't think, if I look back in my time when I was the FD at SMS, if I put another £500,000 worth of inventory in, but it was going to enable me to produce £4 million worth more of sales in a contingent situation, then it would be an easy conversation to have, I think, to be fair. So you've just got to understand what's suitable and what's right for your business. I mean, what I do feel though, and let's not forget that we're all very commercial, of course, in business. I think we just need to add a sort of conscientiousness to our commercial thinking. So, I think over time we have allowed the unit cost to become too important a figure when we should be thinking about the cost of ownership. And I see it socially. I see people going to local shops more. I see people buying things from local shops. Well, get that mentality, get that conscientious mentality into your supply chain thinking. And that will also help with resilience. It may not be the most commercial, but it will be more conscientious.
Thank you, Mark. And Rob, I just wonder, that kind of point around being conscientious came out from your former employer, it sounds. Do you think that, or have you seen in your experience of global supply chains, that there's a cultural difference as to how businesses operate and treat their supply chains, or perhaps engage with their customers?
I think the simple answer is yes, there are some differences. But so, for example, as you know, I spent many years at Toyota, and oftentimes the sort of Japanese lean manufacturing supplier development approach is, you know, seen as being quite progressive, and it certainly is, and it has. You can see, you know, empirically, it's produced results over many years for a company like Toyota. But I would say that around the world now, many other companies in many different sectors are also doing that type of what I would call more collaborative partnering approach with suppliers. So it's certainly not, you know, I wouldn't define it as being something that's only in a particular region. So, and it works here in Europe, it works here in the UK. So it doesn't matter. I think you just got to see your suppliers as part of the value chain and work effectively with them. It doesn't mean you have to be, let's say, just kind and cuddly to the suppliers. You have to be demanding as well as a customer, obviously. But you also have to be open, honest, and supportive. That's the other thing I would say.
Thanks, Rob. And then last question, because we should be all wrapped up. But Dr. Leonage, could I ask you a question around Industry 4? It's a term that sits well within sort of the policy world and you know, research. Sometimes it can perhaps be a bit intimidating to the smaller business, but it absolutely, as you say, brings a load of benefit and really is a concept that needs to be considered and embraced. If you were an owner manager of a smaller business, how would you start your sort of digital journey?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. I think this is a bit challenging. I think first, I think we can start like information sharing thing. As Mark in his presentation, he mentioned about like information sharing to the ERP system. So that is something I think we would start from, because the information sharing throughout your supply chain is not that difficult nowadays, because there are a lot of software like ERP packages, cloud computing, Internet of Things are available. And then gradually, then they can move it down. Maybe 3D printing they can buy. It's not much expensive. And then they think about like a 3D printing for some critical component. If a supply chain unable to supply on time, maybe you have some backup kind of thing, as example 3D printing. And then you can move to a little bit of robotics, automation kind of thing. I think that gradually they need to increase the level of automation and level of industrial 4 techniques into their business. I think best thing is starting from the information sharing.
Thank you. Yeah, visibility really key, isn't it?
Exactly, visibility.
Yeah, you need to understand what you've got to tackle first of all. So
exactly,
thank you very much.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. Right, well, that brings us to the close of this morning's session. So thank you all for joining us. Keep your eyes and ears out for activity and programmes being ran at one of the universities through Make UK or the Nottinghamshire Manufacturing Network, and we'll bid you farewell. Have an enjoyable rest of the day. Thank you.